Welcome to Story Medicine. I am Joe Summerfield. For over 20 years, I've been working to better understand and support people in navigating this human experience. And I've come to believe that stories are encoded with the collective wisdom of all who have come before us. That they bring us into connection with the collective unconscious and contain treasure waiting to be decoded. This podcast explores traditional tales through that lens. Each episode offers a story told in full, an exploration of the medicine it may be offering, and practices to help you to integrate that medicine. Today's story comes from ancient Egyptian mythology, one of the oldest recorded religious traditions in the world. It is preserved across the pyramid texts, dated to around 2400 BCE, the Amduat, the Book of What Is in the Underworld, and the Book of Gates. These inscriptions were carved on the walls of the royal tombs and written on papyrus scrolls and placed with the dead. They describe something that the Egyptians believe happened every single night, without exception. The story is called Ra and Apep, the Eternal Battle. Let's begin. Part 1. The Story. Every day, without fail, the sun rises. The Egyptians knew this, they depended on it. The warmth in the soil that ripened the grain, the light that made life and work possible, and yet they never took it for granted. Not because they were naive, but because they understood something that we have largely forgotten. That the sunrise is not automatic. That the light we wake to each morning is the outcome of a battle fought through the darkness in the hidden depths of the world. A battle that must be fought again tomorrow, and every night that follows, without end. This is the story of that battle. Ra is the sun. Not merely a god who governs the sun from a distance, but the solar force itself expressed as a being. The great disk of light that rests upon his head is not something that he carries, but something that his nature made visible. He and the sun are one thing. Through the daylight hours, Ra crosses the sky in his sacred boat, a great ceremonial vessel, fitted for a god, carried on the waters of the heavens. In this form, he's falcon-headed, sharp-eyed, powerful, the disk blazing above him, and he brings warmth, he brings visibility, he brings the conditions in which life is possible. But as the sun reaches the western horizon, as the light begins its long bleed into orange and red, something shifts. The falcon head gives way to the head of a ram. The fierce sky power of noon replaced by something older and more interior. The light that Ra embodies doesn't disappear, but it draws inward. The way of fire, when the wood runs low, contracts into a deep banked coal. Still present, still alive, but no longer blazing outward into everything. The solar force now turned within. And, when the time comes, Ra boards the night vessel, and he descends. Beneath the earth runs a subterranean river. The Egyptians called the underworld the Duat, a vast realm divided into 12 caverns, one for each hour of the night. Ra must travel through all 12 before the eastern horizon can open and the sun can rise again. There is no other route from west to east. The only way back to morning is through. The night vessel carries a crew. Thoth, the ibis-headed god of wisdom and language, who knows the names that must be spoken to pass each gate. Heka, the god of magic, who carries the spells of protection. Mehen, a great protective serpent who coils himself around the hull of the boat, a living shield against what moves in the darkness outside. And the souls of the righteous dead, permitted to travel alongside Ra on this one night's journey. And there is Set, the red god of desert storms, of disruption, of raw and violent force. He rides in the front of the night vessel with his iron spear raised. They enter the first cavern. Ra's light, ember deep as it is now, contracted within him, still touches the space around the boat, and the dead who dwell in that first cavern, who exist in permanent darkness, reach toward him. They cry out in relief. For brief moments of his passage, they feel warmth, and they are touched by light. And then the boat moves on, and the darkness closes behind it like water over a stone, and they are left again in the black. This is what Ra brings to the underworld in his passing, warmth and the brief proof that light still exists somewhere. Deeper, the second hour, the third, the fourth. By the fourth hour, the underworld changes entirely. The boat enters Rostau, the dark realm of Sokar, the hawk god of the deep dark. Here the subterranean river simply ends. The boat cannot sail. The crew must transform it, and Ra must be carried forward through the pitch-black sand on the back of a great serpent of that deep region. Ra cannot see it. The ember of his solar nature is not enough to illuminate what surrounds him here. He calls out with his voice to announce his passage, to name himself in the dark, and the serpent carries him forward through a silence so complete that it has weight. This is the deepest desert, the place beneath the world where even the sun god cannot see. The fifth hour, and then the sixth. Midnight, exactly. The very centre of the night, equidistant from the last sunset and the next dawn. Something happens here that the Egyptian texts describe but do not explain, perhaps because it can't be explained, only received. Ra, still travelling, the solar force contracted within him, meets Osiris, the lord of the dead who reigns the underworld as Ra reigns in the sky, and the two gods merge. The living sun and the lord of death become for one moment a single being. It lasts only a moment, and then it passes. They separate, and Ra travels on. The seventh hour brings Apep. Apep, the chaos serpent, ancient beyond counting, present in the primordial waters before Ra first emerged, before the world took its shape, before the first word of creation was spoken. He stretches the length of the horizon. His coils, when they close around the night vessel, hold it as completely as a ship held in sandbanks. The boat cannot move. The night cannot progress. The dawn cannot come. And his gaze alone can hold Ra suspended in the darkness, fixed, the journey ended. Every night, in the seventh hour, the boat meets Apep, and the crew fights. Heka speaks the spells of power, words that must be said exactly right in exactly the right sequence. Thoth displays his knowledge of every name and every secret of the deep, and Set thrusts his iron spear into the body of the serpent again and again. Apep's coils are cut open. The hypnotic gaze is broken by the force of Set's attack. Only then, with Apep driven back, can the boat move forward. The eighth hour, the ninth, the 10th. Something is happening to Ra as the hours pass. The solar force that drew inward at sunset, that contracted to ember depth for the descent, is beginning to expand once more, slowly, the light returning to him from within, as if the journey itself, the darkness, the desert crossing, the midnight union, the battle, has fed something that is now building toward expression. The 11th hour, and then the 12th, the final cavern. Here, before Ra can emerge, the night vessel must pass through the body of an enormous serpent called the Life of the Gods. The boat enters the serpent's mouth and travels through its length, and emerges from the other end, changed. What went in was the vessel of night crossing. What comes out is something readied for the morning. And Ra? Ra is no longer the ancient ram. He is Khepri now, the scarab beetle, the image of the newly rising sun. The Egyptians watched the dung beetle roll its ball across the desert sand and saw in that humble, stubborn creature the image of how morning actually works. The disk pressed from behind, making contact with the earth, moved forward by friction and effort and the refusal to stop. The sky goddess Nut reaches down and lifts the vessel. raises it above the horizon, and releases it into the daylight world. The sun rises. And tonight, as surely as it will set, Apep will be waiting in the 7th hour, the coils already forming in the darkness of the duat, the gaze already gathering its stillness. The battle was won last night, and it will be won again tonight, and tomorrow, and in every night that follows. This is not a flaw in the design. It is the design. Part 2. The Medicine. Let's explore the medicine that this story may be offering us. Before we start, if you know somebody who might appreciate this story's medicine right now, please share this episode with them. And if you're enjoying the podcast and would like to help others find it too, please consider subscribing and leaving a review. Thank you. I would like to start by sharing how the ancient Egyptians related to this myth, because it changes the nature of what we're receiving. They didn't just tell the story, they performed it, they acted it out. Priests in the temples of Ra conducted daily rituals, burning effigies of Apep, spitting on his image, hacking it apart with knives, reciting spells from carefully maintained manuals of protection. The dead were placed in their coffins with copies of the Book of the Dead, so that their souls could join Ra's crew on the ceremonial boat and fight alongside him through the night. The Amduat, the detailed account of Ra's 12-hour journey, was inscribed on the walls of royal tombs, so that the pharaoh's soul would know every gate, every guardian, every name that must be spoken to pass through. The myth wasn't a belief held privately in the mind, or even a story told in gatherings. It was enacted repeatedly by real people who understood themselves to be participants in the process of the story. So perhaps before we've even started the analysis, we've already found some valuable medicine for ourselves. There is a kind of wisdom that only becomes real when it's embodied, when it's performed, when the body and practice are involved. The Egyptians knew that enacting an archetypal truth, moving through it physically, speaking the words, making the gestures, changes something that merely considering the pattern does not. We will come back to this. Now, the journey itself and what it reveals. What strikes me as I work through this tale is that it describes an ongoing practice rather than a single heroic event. Many of the stories that we look at in this podcast are about an extraordinary ordeal. But in this story, Ra doesn't defeat Apep only once and establish peace. He doesn't break free from the duat and seal it behind him. Every night, the same 12 caverns, the same encounter in the 7th hour, the same battle. The sunrise each morning is not the legacy of a past victory. It is the direct result of last night's fight. The journey is integral to the renewal of morning. The Egyptians had a concept called ma'at. Order, truth, right relationship, the harmonious functioning of things. And ma'at was understood to be fragile. It didn't sustain itself. It required constant maintenance. The Nile had to flood at the right time. The pharaoh had to perform the rites. The priests had to burn the effigy every day, every year. Everybody had a role in whether the sun came up. This wasn't a superstition. It was a sophisticated understanding that what we might call a life worth living is not created through achievement, but through ongoing practice, something that must be attended to again and again with full presence, because the forces that would unravel it do not rest. In our culture, we seem to have enormous difficulty with this. We want resolution. We want the problem to be solved so that we can move on. We see linear progress. We want recovery, the implication being that once you've recovered, the work is done. And when the darkness returns, when the difficult pattern reasserts itself, when the depression comes back, when the relationship hits the same wall again, we tend to experience it as failure, as evidence that we didn't do the work properly last time, or that the work will never be done properly. This Egyptian story offers an alternative perspective. The return of darkness is not failure, it's integral. It's the natural rhythm of things. The task is not to eliminate Apep once and for all. The task is to show up for the battle night after night with your full crew and with the right instruments, and keep the light moving through so that it can rise again. So, on to the encounter between Ra and Osiris. In another story, Osiris was murdered by Set, dismembered and scattered. Osiris's wife, Isis, gathered the pieces, and through her magic she restored him, not to his life amongst the living, but to a transformed experience as Lord of the Dead. He reigns in the Duat as Ra reigns in the sky. So these are the two governing principles, one above and one below. Ra is the principle of outward radiant ordering light, the force that moves, that illuminates, that nourishes, that crosses the sky, that makes things visible and possible. While Osiris is the principle of inward, of containing, of transformative death, the force that receives, that holds, that transforms in the dark. They are the opposite poles of existence. And at midnight, at the exact still point of the night, equidistant from each horizon, they merge. When I consider this, I think of the rhythms that we see in nature between opposite principles of expansion and contraction, of inward and outward. There is the moment in the rhythm of the sea between the incoming tide and the outgoing, where the water is neither advancing nor retreating. It is neither one thing nor the other. Just as there is a moment between each breath we take, a slight pause between inhale and exhale. And in those pauses, there is a kind of absolute stillness, a unity that exists outside of duality, outside of polarity, a different dimension. I think that this is what the midnight merging of Ra and Osiris points to. Not Ra absorbing death or death extinguishing the sun, but a momentary unity that contains both and that exists briefly outside of the cycle that separates them. And in that point of stillness, something is seeded. The possibility of a new day is born not in the morning, but in the midnight, in the union of the living and the dead, in the moment when the cycle pauses and holds everything at once, at the same time as the peace of nothing. Instinctively, I feel the potency of this message, but I'm not entirely sure how to articulate what it might point to, and I feel quite reluctant to try to apply it, because I don't want to constrict it. Perhaps it would be better to sit with this notion, and look at all the ways that we experience that moment of unity in between, and to uncover for ourselves what the medicine in those moments is experientially. I will certainly be exploring that. But as I am here to decode ancient wisdom for modern life, perhaps one thing that this might point to is something that I've encountered in therapeutic work many times. The turning point in a genuine descent rarely happens when or where people expect it. It doesn't happen when things start to improve. By then it has already happened. It happens at the bottom, in the darkest hour, in the moment that feels most like it will not pass. That is where something shifts, and where the tide turns, and in that moment something is seeded. And only later does the growth become visible. It is worth remembering this when you face what feels like interminable night. The next part of the journey requires us to look more closely at Set. To understand his involvement, we need to know who Set is. Set is the god of deserts, storms, chaos, and disorder. He is the brother and also the murderer of Osiris. In another famous Egyptian myth, Set kills his brother, dismembers the body, and scatters it across the land. So he is dangerous and destructive. He is associated with the Red Desert and the violent forces at the edges of civilized life. And yet, the Egyptians never fully demonized him. Some pharaohs took Set as their patron god, understanding that his qualities, however difficult, were needed. So he's not so much evil as ungovernable. And we see in this story that he does have some vital function. Here he is in Ra's night vessel, iron spear raised, doing what none of the other gods could do. Why? Why is the destructive, chaotic god the one who can defeat the chaos of Apep? I have a theory on this which I would like to share with you. It requires us to make a distinction that the Egyptian sources don't state in exact terms, but I believe they do support it. And that is, Set and Apep represent two fundamentally different kinds of chaos. Set is chaos within the created world, storms, disruption, the forces that break things open and push into unknown territory. Set is the capacity within the system to go outside of order. Dangerous and ungovernable, but he exists within the world. He belongs to it as the necessary force of possibility. Whereas Apep is something else. In the Egyptian accounts, Apep was present in the primordial waters of Nun before Ra first emerged, before light, before order, before creation itself. He is pure Isfet, the negation of Ma'at. So he is not chaos as violence or destruction or disruption. He is chaos as in the abyss, as in the undifferentiated totality that preceded everything. Before Ra, before the world, there was formless, infinite potential, and Apep is the gravitational pull of that state. Like a force of nature, if unopposed, everything returns to the formlessness from which it came. So it's not malevolent annihilation or violence. It's dissolution back into the absolute. And only Set can fight this. The only thing that can hold back that dissolution is a force willing to go into the brutal dark and meet it with equal ferocity. Set's chaos, the chaos that charts unknown territory, that refuses to be absorbed, is what makes the navigation through Apep's chaos possible. This feels like incredibly rich medicine. Perhaps it's about the parts of us that are fierce, disruptive, and ungovernable. Often we learn to manage them, to contain them, or to apologize for them. And we find ourselves poorly equipped to contend with the challenges of life. Equally, sometimes for various reasons, we can come to be led by that energy, and that too can be destructive. There are encounters in the natural rhythm of life where what is needed is the capacity to channel the Set energy. And the question is whether we know the Set energy within us, and whether we know when and how to deploy it. I think this aspect of the story also draws an important distinction for us between the chaos that is the spirit of possibility and the chaos that is absolute. The story suggests that the former has purpose, and that the latter not only exists as a differentiated spirit, but that it will present itself to us again and again in the natural rhythms of life. And we must fight it, and we must stay in alignment with our purpose. And on to the serpent of the 12th hour, the life of the gods, through whose body the night vessel must pass before dawn can come. Across cultures, serpents are interpreted as carrying transformation in their very nature. They shed the skin of what they were to emerge renewed. And here, at the threshold between night and morning, the boat must pass through the body of a serpent before Ra can be reborn as Khepri. And it must pass through it, like some kind of birth canal of shedding and renewal. What goes in is the vessel of the night crossing, everything accumulated through the 12 hours of descent and darkness and death union and desert and battle. What emerges is something renewed and ready for the morning. The skin of the night shed, the form changed by the passing through. I think this is significant medicine for how we approach our own necessary transformations. Not that we have to understand them or make sense of them in advance, but that we have to pass through fully. We have to allow ourselves to be transformed, to shed what no longer serves us or what might impede us on our passage through that birthing canal. If we want to make that transformation, there is no alternative. And then, renewed, Khepri emerges, the scarab, the rolling of the sun up from the horizon at dawn. Notice that Ra doesn't emerge blazing. He emerges as a dung beetle, rolling the disk from below. The Egyptians watched this creature and saw in its method something sacred. Not flight, not triumph, but humble contact with the earth, friction, the stubborn forward pressure that brings the ball to the top of the slope inch by inch. And perhaps this is what renewal actually looks like most of the time for us. Not dramatic breakthrough and the immediate emergence of something radiant and glorious. More of a breakdown and a gradual rebuild through daily, effortful, unglamorous forward motion that, when done consistently, eventually produces the glorious light and the soaring falcon. That light is not a permanent achievement. It's what happens when you show up for the crossing, night after night, and keep moving through. Part 3. Integration Practices. The medicine doesn't come from understanding these patterns intellectually. It comes from the practices, from allowing the transformation to happen in your body, in your honest acknowledgement of where you are. Here are 3 practices to help you integrate some of this story's medicine. First practice. Name your crew. The story is explicit that Ra doesn't make the crossing alone. He has specific companions with specific functions: wisdom, magic, protection, fierce force. This practice asks, what is your crew for the night crossings in your life? Take 20 minutes with your journal. Think of a current or recent difficulty, something that felt or feels like your dark hours. And then write 4 questions and explore your answers. The first question: who or what in my life carries the thoth function? The one who helps me find the right words and name what's happening clearly. Question 2. Who or what carries the heka function? The practices, the rituals or disciplines that protect me when I'm vulnerable. Question 3. Who or what is my mehen? The thing that encircles me and holds me and protects me. And finally, question 4. Where is my set? The fierce, ungovernable quality that can drive the spear in when the 7th hour comes. Consider each function both ways, as a quality within yourself, and also as a person or a practice in your life, something external. You may find that some functions are stronger internally than externally, or the reverse. The gaps are as informative here as the presences. The medicine isn't in having perfect answers. It's in discovering which crew members are present and which are missing. Second practice. Locate your 7th hour. This practice works with the ongoing practice medicine, the rhythm rather than the resolution. Think of something that you keep returning to, a pattern or a struggle, a darkness that comes back despite your best efforts. Rather than approaching it as evidence of failure, spend 15 minutes writing about it as your Apep, the thing that will return, not because you haven't done the work, but because it's part of the rhythm of your particular life. You can explore questions such as, what is the recurring 7th hour in my life? What does it look like when it arrives? What has worked in the past to keep the boat moving through it? And crucially, what aspects of me do I need to deploy to face it down? Not to be sucked into the abyss, but to pass through the night and arrive at the dawn. The deliverable here is not a plan to eliminate Apep. It's a map of your recurring night and what the crossing requires. Third practice, the midnight question. This is perhaps the deepest practice and the most open-ended, appropriate for sitting with rather than resolving. The story tells us that the turning point is seated at midnight, in the still point of unity between tides, before the ordeal is won and long before the dawn. This practice asks you to pay attention to that moment in your life. Identify a descent that you are in, or have been in. Sit quietly for 10 minutes, no journal, no phone, and simply spend the time holding curiosity. What does that moment in between feel like in my body? Are there any past circumstances where I can recognize that moment of the turning of the tide? In some circumstance in my life right now, where am I in relation to that point? Am I in the descent or in the ascent? Or perhaps am I right in that moment of unity? Perhaps you could find that moment of unity between your breaths. Don't try to answer, and don't become preoccupied with the questions themselves. Just let the questions and let this notion be present, and notice what comes to you. After 10 minutes, if anything has surfaced, then write it down. But the practice is in the sitting, not the writing. The medicine here is in learning to be with the midnight hour, rather than fighting to get past it. Ra fights the battle, the crew holds their posts. The light contracts, and then slowly, humbly, through the effort of crossing, returns. The design is not that the darkness ends. The design is that we show up for it, night after night, and keep the boat moving through. The wisdom in these old stories waits patiently. I hope that this one's medicine found you where you need it. Thank you for listening to Story Medicine. I am Joe Summerfield. Until next time.